bienvenue, bonjour, hello, welcome. And I am so glad to see you. I am so glad that we did not chase you off with all the bad sex in the last video. It was not my fault. I blame D.H. Lawrence. D.H. Lawrence. Bad sex. Bad sex. So I am so happy to see you. I have brought you a much better book than the last book. It was not really fair to start my videos with such a poor book, but they made me. And then Her Infernal Majesty goes and uses all the battery and doesn't change it. So I am not having a good time with my second video getting it started. It's a little bit hard. But anyway, we carry on. Her Infernal Majesty is terribly selfish. She always selfish. Doesn't think about the rest of us. Doesn't even put all the equipment away properly. Really, very selfish, Her Infernal Majesty. Anyway, before we start, I has a book that you will find very, very useful. It is the Black Cockie Press 12-week novel writing masterclass. This book, you can order it with some of the links, the little links that are down below. You can order this book. It is so useful. So useful. Even Her Infernal Majesty recommend it. So it must be good, because she doesn't recommend things just because we ask her to. No. So this book. And now, I told you I has a much better book for you. Très. So much better. Very, very, very much better. I have got for you this time Ulysses by James Joyce. Yes, Ulysses by James Joyce. Now, there is a great, huge amount that is talked about Ulysses by James Joyce. It is a very, very famous book. I am not a Joycean scholar. He boasted himself that he had put so many little tricks and things into the books that it would keep the scholars guessing at it for centuries, and I am not a scholar of Joyce. I am not. I am just a reader. And so I am going to be talking about Ulysses as a reader and as a writer, but not as a scholar. There is so much in that book, and it was a while since I have read it, if I am to be completely honest. But it is a book that really, once you have read it, it divides your reading life into before Ulysses and after Ulysses. You are not the same person that you was when after you have read this book. It is not the longest book. War and Peace is at least twice as long as this book, so it is not the length of the book. I have read plenty of long books. The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky is a longer book in terms of the words. Ulysses is an absolute masterpiece. It is the kind of book that comes around once every 100 years. There is not many books like it. It's the only other book that is in any way possibly comparable to Ulysses, and that is only because it is completely bonkers book, is Tristram Shandy. Her ladyship talk about Tristram Shandy. by Lawrence Stone, which actually influenced James Joyce with writing of Ulysses. So it is it plays into that. So even though this is a book that will influence writing for the next century, it is still influenced by this other book, this very, very old novel. And so it is quite interesting how long that book reverberates. But Ulysses happens on it happens in Dublin on the 6th of June 1904. It is one day, and it follows an ordinary man and his wanderings through Dublin on the day that his wife is meeting with a man that she will be having sex with. Yes, and he knows this. He knows this is happening, and yet he still buys her dirty book for her birthday and thinks about things to buy for her birthday. So they have a very complicated marriage, made probably more complicated by the death of their son, their only son. They have a daughter, but she is a boarding school, I think. But their marriage is definitely made more complicated by the death of her son, because it is called Ulysses, because it is mapped off Homer's Odyssey. And there are 12 chapters. No. There are 18 chapters. 18. What is that in English? 18. 18 chapters, like 18 books of the Odyssey. They are mapped off, and they each have the name of the particular episode from the Odyssey. So, like the Odyssey, it does not start with the protagonist, Leopold Bloom. It starts with the character who is a son-type character, Stephen Dedalus, just as the Odyssey starts not with Odysseus, but with his son Telemachus, who is in search of a father. And Stephen Dedalus is in search of something. His mother has died. There is no father that we hear of. He is in search of a father figure. Not that Leopold Bloom is a terribly appropriate father figure. Mais it is a book that is so very experimental. As a reader, you are forced to really look at language. It is also, this is one man and one day and one city, yet it is an entirety of literary culture. It is an entirety of Irish culture. So it is an extraordinary tour de force. It was published in 1922, and it was published by Shakespeare and Co. in Paris. Joyce had lived in Paris for quite some time and was supported by various different people in his time that he spent in writing this book. It was not very popular in the newly independent Republic of Ireland, which did not enjoy seeing itself in the portrait that Joyce had created. They did not enjoy the portrait that Joyce had created of them, which admittedly is not the most flattering. It is a true portrait, though. It is a true portrait. You cannot always be flattering, and sometimes you need a mirror that is not showing you a flattering distortion. But the unpleasant truth. Talking of the unpleasant truth of life, that is another thing that made Ulysses quite scandalous. Again, I bring you a scandalous novel. It was banned for a long, almost instantly, because people did not understand it. It was banned until the 1930s because it is showing the ordinary life. And people were not ready for ordinariness. Very, very, very ordinariness. People, they go caca. They pee. They have their monthly. It is a book in which the ordinary of the ordinary life and the paths of life that normally what was Victorian polite society drew a discreet veil around is stripped entirely bare. But that is part of the point of modernism, is having gone through a horrific war, like World War I. They had no idea the second part, there was only the first part two. Having gone through what they thought was the most appalling thing that could happen, it makes no sense to continue to pretend that the world is all nice and cute and everybody down the bottom is all smooth and bare like marble statues. That we are all colossus. That we do not all have feelings that are sexual, feelings that are all sorts of different things, impolite. That people do not get drunk and be sick in the street. This is scandalous for them, and it took the judges actually, and it took actually reading the book itself to understand that what Joyce was doing was not creating something that was supposed to be titillating, but creating something that was supposed to be real. So that while you can take a chapter like Nausicaa, which is one of my favorite chapters, along with Penelope, the final chapter, which is 8 sentences long, one of those sentences being 2,000 words. It is, as I said, it is a most remarkable book. But Nausicaa has a Leopold Bloom sitting at the beach, looking at a pretty girl, and he has his hands in his pockets. But the pretty girl has her own ideas about this man with his hands in his pockets, and she seems to find it flattering and somewhat erotic herself to turn him on. She revels. She revels in the power of what her body can do to this man. It is a very, very strange chapter. But there are so many strange things in this book. When you read it, you lose the capability to read lesser things. You gain how can I explain this? You lose your tolerance for really bad writing. It makes a lot of writings that you tolerated or were quite happy reading before you had read this book. It makes it melt. You see it for the melt that is. So that is something to consider when if you wish to read this book. Is it will dramatically change how you see writing and what you expect from writing. Not that you will expect to get Ulysses every time because it is such a huge book and there is only one. But just as reading Laura Thought of Him, Patrick White, makes you less tolerant of lesser writing, so too does Ulysses. Great books do that. Great books have that sort of power. It is a remarkable power that a great book has. And as a writer, it is a wonderful book. You can mind this thing for the rest of your life and you will not run out of things to steal. You can steal them now, it is out of copyright. So, what would I advise if you wish to embark on reading Ulysses for the first time? I am not a Ulysses scholar, but I have read the book. So, I would say that if you wish to read this book, the first thing that you need to do is to read the Odyssey by Homer. Because, and I know it sounds terrible for me to be suggesting a second book to read before you read this book, but I tell you, it makes it so much easier to read this. So, what you need to do is read the Odyssey. The Odyssey is not hard. Get a nice translation. Something like the Penguin translation is a very good translation. I will put it down below. Read the Odyssey because so much of Ulysses is based on this. In terms of its structure, it is very useful to know what Ulysses is doing in each of the episodes before you see Bloom or Dudless do it in those episodes. The second thing that I would say is buy a copy that has explanatory notes in the back. Because there is so many things going on, sometimes it just really helps to have something that explains exactly what is happening. And the third thing that I would say, and this is something that I learned through the action of reading the book, is that you need to read each section, each chapter in its entirety, some of which are very long and quite hard to read. So it may take a couple of ones to do so, but it is much easier to read each chapter in their entirety. So put aside an afternoon, it can be done, rather than picking it up and putting it down and picking it up and putting it down, because the chapters are like, each chapter is different. It has a different literary style, especially the oxen of the sun. If you can guess through that, you can guess through anything. That is where, if you're going to give up, you will give up into the oxen of the sun. It is unbelievably difficult. But it can be read. It can be read. Apparently, it took Joyce 1,000 hours to write it. 1,000 hours. He imitates all the literary styles between the earliest of English all the way through to the modern day. It is a tour de force, but it is very, very difficile on the reader. But it is worth persevering. So read every chapter in its entirety in one go. That is what I can tell you about Ulysses as a reader. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope to see you again. Next time, I will bring you another video about another modern writer. And until then, au revoir.
If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cockie Press website www.blackcockiepress.com.au, where you will find books and other materials to help with your writing.